Hello everybody and welcome back to Odin's Movie Blog. I am the critic who is a cynic. Hope you're doing well. And today we're going to talk about Adam Driver, who is a man I actually really like. I think that if we're going to talk about new characters and new actors into the sequel trilogy who are good or who are consistent, who I don't mind, who I don't absolutely hate, Adam Driver would definitely be one of them because he doesn't really get involved in the political game. He's not really ever come out to attack the fans, for instance. He's never really come out and said anything foolish. Now, of course, I'm sure you could probably pull up something or dig up something saying, oh, but he said this and he said that. Again, no one's perfect. But at the end of the day, I think he's definitely the most consistent and probably the least controversial as far as outside of the movies are concerned. Obviously, we could say a lot about Kylo Ren and we could say a lot about his character, but that is less Adam Driver's fault and more the writing and the direction because he is given a certain direction, he is given a script, and he cannot change those things because, you know, not only is he just not a huge enough star. I mean, there are certain stars, there are certain actors in Hollywood who could say, oh, I'm not doing this, or we're doing it my way. Adam Driver just really isn't at that level. Not to say that he's not important, or not to say that he's not big either, because after this movie especially, his career is pretty much set for him being able to get roles. With all that being said, though, Adam Driver is still, it seems to be, admitting in this article that Episode 9 is the last chance to get it right. Now, why would you use that kind of language? Let me first off let me start by saying this is actually not what Adam Driver says. This is essentially a clickbait article, so I wanted to get that right out of the way. And so some of you might be saying, well, isn't this a clickbait video? It's like, kind of, but also at the same time, I think that Adam Driver reveals certain things, and also, too, anytime, any chance that I get to expose the media for what it is, I will always jump on it, especially if I can also talk about Star Wars at the same time, because it's been a while since I've talked about Star Wars, you know, because there's been other things going on in the news lately, so I wanted to talk about it. But anyway, is Episode 9 the last chance to get it right? Yes. Let me start off by just saying that even though he does not actually say that, even though this is totally the article, and totally the writer of the article trying to get clicks, you know, saying, oh my gosh, Kylo Ren is admitting that there's something wrong here. That's what everyone's going to be thinking. When in reality, that is just not the case. That is just not what he's actually saying. But it still poses a very interesting question, which is that, yes, Episode 9, yes, it is. It is the last chance that they have. Just look at the current state of the fandom after The Last Jedi. Again, you have a 50-50 split on Rotten Tomatoes, and I think that if you actually talk to the fans in general, you see that there's a huge portion of the fan base that is just not happy, that doesn't like the current direction that Star Wars is going. I mean, that is just made obvious by the fact that you had such a huge groundswell of support for someone like Star Wars Theory to get the copyright strike removed. And now I keep saying copyright strike. It wasn't a copyright strike. It was still a copyright claim. To get that removed, the fact that Lucasfilm, at least according to all the sources that we have, stepped in to do that is just amazing. It's just phenomenal. And a lot of that has to do with the fact of not only just how loud the Phantom Menace is, but also the numbers of the Phantom Menace also. Because no company would actually do that. No company would stick their neck out in this kind of a situation if they didn't think that it was going to be much of a big deal. Obviously, they must think that there's a large enough people that's going to have an impact on financials, which we already knew about, seeing that Solo is the first Star Wars film to ever lose money. And it's not because Solo was a terrible film. It's because Solo was in the shadow, the huge, immense shadow of The Last Jedi, which broke the fandom. So Episode 9 is indeed the last chance that they have. But what is what is actually being said here? Let's actually go into the article, because once again, the article is definitely spinning and twisting the words of Adam Driver here. So it says, despite both The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi receiving a critical adulation and record-breaking box office success, they also each came with their fair share of controversy amongst fans. I love how this person is like, look how fancy I am. I'm saying adulation. Yes, amongst. I am a proper English gentleman. But at the end of the day, it's like, okay, but you know, as I just said, you just use this article for clickbait because it's nothing new here. Anyway, The Force Awakens was widely criticized for following too closely in the footsteps of A New Hope, particularly with the Starkiller-based climax. And as for The Last Jedi, well, I thought it was great, but we get into the controversy surrounding that film, we'll be here all day. All of which makes Adam Driver's comments about Star Wars Episode 9 in an interview with Deadline pretty telling. So there they try and say, oh, you remember all that Last Jedi controversy? Oh, let's not talk about it because we could be here all day. But it makes what Adam Driver says interesting. Not really. If anything, I think what he says here, what Adam Driver says here is interesting from a film and theater perspective because he talks about his own experience working working in the theater, you know, working on those kind of projects, those more long-form projects where you dedicate a lot of time and do several performances over and over again. But comparing it to the movie industry, too, and how the movie industry is very much different. I think that it's interesting to hear what he says. But to say that this is not speculation and this is not putting words in Adam Driver's mouth by this writer on We Got This Covered, I think is a bit of a stretch to say the least. But yes, The Last Jedi was indeed controversial. Because yes, you may have liked it. Oh, it had critical adulation and record-breaking success. The Last Jedi did not have record-breaking success. It made $1.3 billion, which is very successful. But it's also $700 million less than The Force Awakens, and also led to the first film ever in Star Wars history to lose money. In fact, $200 million. But, you know, you didn't hear that from me. But what does Kylo Ren say? What does he say about all of this stuff? He says, in the plays that I've done, a 6-month run, on the very last day, you finally feel like, oh, now I have a better understanding of what it is that I want to do. I wish we could do this all over again. Someone who's done theater several times before, I completely understand what you're talking about here. Working on a play, the questions you can ask yourself are infinite, and that's what's torturous about film sometimes. You only have one shot to get it right, and you can do a lot of takes, but we're not all going to get back together again and do this. But for something you're doing for 6 years, you still have a chance to go back and make something a bit more articulated. So what he's trying to say here is, in theater, when you're on stage, you have that one shot. You have that one chance to make it right, but because you're doing it constantly over and over and over again, you get to ask yourself those questions. You get to make different choices and different decisions for a different audience every single time. Movies don't have that same luxury. Yes, movies, you do get the chance to take multiple takes and try and get the right performance, but at the end of the day, he's right. You might have several takes, but doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get that right performance, because guess what? Whatever is on screen, whatever's printed, and eventually put in the original movie, it's going to be that every time that you watch it. It's one of the amazing things about film. But he makes a good point too by saying, but when you have 6 years on a film, on a project, over time you can obviously adopt. You can obviously adapt various character choices, various character arcs, and you can try and do the very best that you can to have that be consistent throughout several films, but also to be able to reach out with the Force, one could say, and do the very best performance one can as well. But here, as you can see, he has not said that Episode 9 is the last chance to get it right. So where does that come in? Let's keep reading. It's an interesting perspective on filmmaking. A piece of theater is a living, breathing thing right up until its last performance, with the actors constantly able to change their mood based on their understanding of the characters. Meanwhile, once this film is in the can, that's pretty much it. Yep, exactly right. It's interesting that Driver perhaps feel pressure in this last movie to really nail it. None of the cast of The Last Jedi could wholly ignore the backlash it received. And while many of the criticisms were half-baked, nobody wants their film to upset fans, so perhaps in his last outing in the trilogy, he's hoping that audiences will consider that they've got it right. This is very interesting, seeing that you have admitted that The Last Jedi has some backlash, but then you try and say that many of the criticisms are half-baked. So you go after the fan base, because that's just what the media does. They love to go after the fan base. They love to go after the Phantom Menace. And then you try and say, yeah, but, you know, according to this article, as I said in the title of my video, that Kylo Ren, that, you know, Adam Driver is saying that, you know, seems to be giving credence to the people that had issues with the film. But as you'll see, that's just not really what he's saying. Also, of note in the interview is where Adam Driver explains the following about the role of Kylo. With Star Wars, I had one piece of information of where it was all going, and that's where it's been in my head for a long time, and things were building towards that. I'm insanely curious as to what this piece of information might be, and what destiny Kylo Ren's heading for. Of all the sequel trilogy characters, he's by far the most interesting and well acted, so I hope I will at least agree with you there, that I think that he has the most interesting character. Unfortunately, that character has been dragged through the mud by the various writers, specifically Rian Johnson, but I will definitely admit that he still is acting the hell out of the role with the direction and writing that he's been given. So I hope this film doesn't turn him into just another cackling space tyrant. I suppose we'll get an idea of what's in store once the first Star Wars Episode 9 teaser hits the internet, which hopefully will be very soon, but interestingly hasn't been soon. Hasn't happened yet. And the questions are still, you know, going around. Why? Why are they trying to wait? You know, as I've been saying, as many of us have been saying, it's because they know they have to get this right. They know that they only have one more chance to really save Star Wars for the fan base. Because if they don't get Episode 9 right, then people are not going to continue to follow along. They're not going to buy the streaming service to watch all of the new Star Wars shows. Because they're just not going to be interested anymore. So many people are already not interested anymore. But the interesting thing about all of this is that he says he's hoping that audiences will consider that they've got it right. And yet nowhere here does he actually even say that. He only says you only have one shot to get it right as far as how you do things on screen. So either he's taking a quote completely out of context and not actually giving it to us, or he's just totally making this up in the first place. Now, this says that the source is Deadline. So let us actually see here if he even says anything at all, as Deadline just continues to spaz out as it's trying to load a Black Klansman interview, it looks like, because this is just the way that the internet works. So oh man, I hope that this doesn't go crazy on me. Oh man. Oh man. All right, so he's talking about this. All right. Star Wars trilogy. It's been my second time. All right, so he talks about Episode 9 there. Projects. Okay. Directors. So is that the only Star Wars thing? So literally it's just that one paragraph. So it says it's sourcing this. It's sourcing Deadline here. All right, so let's see let's see uncut, the interview here that is on Deadline.com. So it says, it's been my second time doing something where it's lasted 6 years. I think with Star Wars, it's 6 years this year that I've known about it or been working on it. I had this experience once with Girls, which is a terrible show, where it was 6 or 7 years from the moment we shot the pilot to the very last thing. Since I've been working, it's what I've been used to in a way where you do other things and then go back to see your friends. It's always good and go back to those groups. With Girls, there wasn't really an end in sight, so it was fun to develop it as it went along and to think that where it was going. With Star Wars, I had one piece of information and where it was all going, and that's where it has been in my head for a long time. Okay, so here we go. And things were building towards that. It feels very theatrical, if anything, because in the plays that I've done, 6-month run, on the very last day, you finally feel like, oh, now I have a better understanding of what is doing, of what it is I want to do. I wish that we could do it all over again. Working on a play, the questions you can ask yourself are infinite, and that's what's torturous about film sometimes. You only have one shot to get it right, and you can do a lot of takes, but we're not all going to get back together and do this again. But for something you're done for 6 years, you still have a chance to go back and make something a little bit more articulated. So, as you can see, this is the uncut interview here. This person says that audiences will consider that they've got it right, and he says that nowhere. As you saw on the screen, that's the one time he talks about Star Wars in that interview. And this phrase, that audiences will consider they got it right, is nowhere in here. So what is this all about? People are like, oh gosh, Odin, you're just all over the place. It's my ADD. I can't help it sometimes. But the whole point of this article was to try and say, Adam Driver says that Star Wars Episode 9 is the last chance to get it right, but he doesn't actually even say that. He mentioned saying that you only get one shot sometimes in film because whatever's on screen is what's going to stay on screen. You can't change that like you can in theater. But he's not saying that Episode 9, in his own words, he is the one not saying that. He is not saying that Episode 9 is the last chance. Again, I'm saying that. I think most of us here on the internet are trying to say that. So what does this mean? It means that we got this covered. David James over at We Got This Covered is clickbaiting you. He is saying that Adam Driver is saying something, and he didn't say it at all. And it's so funny that 44% of the people who've read this article are unmoved. And I'm going to say, I'm actually amused by this. I'm actually quite amused by this because you claim that Adam Driver said something, and then it turns out he didn't actually say it. Guys, if you didn't trust the media before, especially the shill media, especially the Star Wars media, why would you trust them now? Like, seriously, when even I, who normally don't pick up this kind of stuff, can pick this out and say, wait a minute, so there's something not quite right here, then almost anyone can. And it's just so fascinating to see this happen. But guys, what are y'all's thoughts on this? Like, seriously, like, do you see Adam Driver's obviously not saying that? You know, he might feel that way, but he doesn't say it here. What he's trying to say is that, yes, just like in theater where you can improve yourself every single day, with film, you can't do that necessarily. Obviously, you can go from take to take. Once it's, in the can, it's there. But because you're working on a project for 6 years, it means you do have more opportunities to, as he says, make something a little bit more articulated. But what he's talking about there is performing. He's an actor. He's an actor of both the stage and the screen. So he's talking about just how acting works. He's not making a commentary on Star Wars. So we have, once again, a terrible, garbage tier clickbait article. And this time it's from We Got This Covered. Guys, what are y'all's thoughts about this? Would love to hear your own thoughts. Again, I love Adam Driver. And hey, go ahead and go to Deadline and check out the interview that he did. Again, BlacKkKlansman, even though the last 5 minutes ruin the entire film, in my opinion, I honestly think that Adam Driver is an amazing part of it, and I would love to see Adam Driver continue to get more just awesome roles, and just read some of the things that he says, because he's a really cool dude. Like, he really is. Is he perfect? No. But I would say out of all the Hollywood actors currently working, he's probably one of the few that I could actually say, oh, you know what? I could actually watch this guy in almost anything. Almost anything. But guys, thank you so much for watching. Like this video, smash that like button, give me a thumbs up, give me a subscribe. You're all amazing and beautiful people. Have a great day, and as always, God bless.